Hello and welcome back to our next tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to look at a technique called instantiation. We're going to use it in two different ways. The word instantiate just means to add, so to add an object to our game, to instantiate an object, to make an instance of that object. And it's fairly straightforward. Now we're going to use it in, like I said, two different ways, but there are literally thousands of applications for the code and the technique that we're going to look at, and I'm sure at some point in your game you will want to make something or use this technique in this code. So I'm going to start off by jumping into Photoshop. And I'm going to make a new sprite, and that's not what I wanted. We'll file new, and we want to set our size. So we'll make this 50 by 50, so something quite small. We'll go create. Okay, so there's my sprite. I actually wanted a transparent background, but we'll work on that now. So, okay, we get our, where is our eraser tool? There it is there, and we just rub all that out. I'm sure there's easier ways to do that. And so next, all I want to do really is make, so it's going to start with my ellipse tool. I'm going to draw this around here, and then we'll make a circle. And again, there's 50 ways to do that. So we're going to use this as just an object. I just want to make a sprite so you can see me bring it in and use it with a collider. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and we'll put this onto my desktop, and we'll call it Circle. And we want it to be a PNG file, so we want it to be a simple file with a an alpha channel, so we'll save that. Okay, so we're done in Photoshop. That wasn't too difficult. So we have here a folder for our sprites. So with the folder selected, I'm going to right click and go import new asset, go to my desktop, and there's my circle. I'm going to import it. Now in order to use this in my game, to instantiate it, what I need to do is I need to make a thing called a prefab. So I'm going to make a folder called prefabs. Okay, and then inside this I'm going to create a prefab. Now prefab itself is just a folder, so we'll call this bullet. Now what does a prefab do? Well, if you had a bullet for a gun and you wanted it to be added into the game, then you would make a prefab of that bullet. So it can be instantiated, it can be, an instance can be made of it at any time during the game. If you had a bead of water that was going to be part of a shower of rain that you wanted to add to a game, you would do the same. So anything that needs to be added into the game, if you have a non-player character, a bad guy, however complex that character is, you would put all of the character's assets, its scripts, etc. into a folder, a prefab folder, and then when you added that folder into the game, when you added that prefab, then that character, that non-player character, would be added. So before we can make this prefab, we need to basically assemble it over here in the game area, in the scene. So I'm going to take my sprite circle and drag it over here, so there it is. And for now I'm just going to move it so we can see it a little more clearly, so there it is. So I'm going to add a collider to it so it has a little bit of physics, and I'm going to add a 2D circle collider, and that has been added well, but it's still a tiny bit, the radius is a tiny bit too much, so maybe 0.2. 0.23. Yeah, that looks about right there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to add to have some physics on this item is I'm going to add a 2D rigid body, or a rigid body 2D, which is there. So now if I press play, this item here falls under the weight of gravity. Okay, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to rename it, because it's called circle here, I'm going to call it bullet. And it's nice and big. Now you might want something much smaller, but this is just so it's easy to see. So after I've created it here in the hierarchy, in the scene, in order to turn it into a prefab, I literally drag and drop it into this prefab folder. And you can see that it's turned blue here, just to indicate that it has something inside it, this prefab. Now, I can change this item here, and the prefab will not be updated. But if I make a change to this item here, every time it's instantiated, every time it's added to the game, whatever is in this folder is what's added. So this is now a single instance of this. So we will come back and add a script to this probably to give it some velocity, to add it like a gun, or a bullet to a gun. But for now we're just going to give it some raw physics here. So it's got a collider and it's got a rigid body. So now I'm going to delete it from my hierarchy. So if I want to add this item, I have to tell Unity where to add it. It doesn't just magically appear randomly on the screen, so it needs a place on my 2D screen to be added. So normally what we do is we'll select our player, and then we'll create a child of that, which is an empty. So this empty has no physics, and it has no, it's not a rasterized piece of graphics, or it's literally just a location in 2D space. So I'm going to call this firing point. And I'm just going to play the game here for a second, just so you see that it's a child of the character. So as the character moves, it also moves. Now, it'll be interesting to see what our what happens when we fire. So we may have to play around with this a little bit. As you can see here, it's plus on the x-axis in this direction here. When I flip it, it's still plus on the x-axis. So its rotation is not flipped in the same way as our player is. So this is 180, and now it's 0. Whereas with the firing point, it's 0 and it's still 0. So we may have to fix that, otherwise we'll end up, when we turn around, we'll end up shooting ourselves. So that's not ideal. But we've identified that as a problem, and we can fix it a bit later. So I have made my bullet prefab, and now I have a point in 3D space where it will be fired from. So now what I need to do is make some sort of script that will give me input and will let me fire. So let's go do that. So let's close up some of these folders here and go to our scripts, and I'm going to add to our player script. So I'm going to double click on that and open up MonoDevelop. So this is everything that we have written so far to try and get our character to move and rotate. So if we want to press a button, and we want it to be, at any time of the game we can press a button, that'll have to go into update. So let's, under all our movement, let's add in, actually, well, before we say any key, let's add in another keystroke input. So let's say if input dot get key code dot, and we can pick any key we want. So let's pick F for fire. Okay, and then we close that bracket, and we're going to open up curly brackets so that we can put in a function in here, or put in a command. So if we press the F key, something's going to happen. So what do we want to happen? Well, we want to instantiate our bullet. So before we can add it in here, we have to have added it in as a variable. So let's add a variable in up here. And this is going to be a public, so we can see it in the inspector. And we want it to be a rigid body 2D, which is that there. And we'll call it bullet. Okay. So we have a variable then that's a rigid body 2D. When it's a rigid body 2D, all that means is that the item that we're adding in must have this rigid body 2D component on it. If I try and use another object that doesn't have physics, it won't work. So that's all that means. Okay, so let's try and look at what code we would use to do that. So we are going to say so rigid body 2D, and we'll call this bullet instance. So we're going to make a variable, and this new variable that we're making is going to have this name here. Now I don't need to declare this as a variable, but in a few minutes what we're going to do is we're going to add a force to it. So we're going to add this line here. We're going to add a force to the bullet. But in order to do that, we need to make a variable of it. So I'll just keep going and hopefully this will make sense. So I'm going to make a new object, and that object is going to be called bullet instance. Now I give the instantiate function. So instantiate. Now what do we want to instantiate? Well, we want to instantiate our bullet, which is what we've declared as a variable. And where do we want to instantiate it? Well, that's a good question. So we need to add in another variable. So we're going to go public, and it has to be a transform, and we'll call this firing point. Now this does not need to have the same name as the empty that's going to fire it. In fact, let's give it a different name. We'll just call it F point, just to illustrate that fact. So this can be called anything. So we're going to instantiate the bullet, because that's the name of my variable here. And where are we going to instantiate it? Well, we're going to instantiate it at F point. So we're going to instantiate it at its transform.position, and also at its rotation. Sorry, we need to put in F point first. Oops, F point dot transform dot rotation, and then we close the brackets. And then we need to say as rigid body 2D. Cool. And that's our command. So it's quite a long piece of text, but it's simple. We're saying when somebody presses the F key, add this object at this position with this rotation, and when you add it with physics. So let's save this and see if it works, or if Unity tells us we've made an error. Okay, now before we if I press play now and I press the F key, nothing will happen. So let's just test that. So, and it's saying that I haven't assigned the bullet to the script. So I'm going to click on my player here, and I'm going to find this player script. So it's saying it doesn't have this F point, this transform, and nor does it know what bullet to add. Well, the F point is this object here. and the bullet is the prefab that we've already made. So now we've told it what it needs to know, and let's press play. And I'm going to press spacebar to jump, and I can go left and I can go right, and now I'm going to press F. Okay. And we have an issue here, but it's a really fun issue because I've got the ability to add in thousands and thousands and thousands of these objects. So let's just stop that for a moment. So that, while not what we wanted, was fun. So why did that happen? Well, it's because I said get key. So I'm going to say get key down. Okay, and we'll save that. And now we'll press play. And I'm going to press F. And while that is more desirable, it's less fun. But I can press the F key many, many, many times and still have madness. So that's how you instantiate, that's how you fire. Now let's fire with a bit more intent. So we want to add a force. So let's have a look at how we would do that. So what we're going to do is, down here we're going to say so bullet instance dot actually I don't need those brackets. So bullet instance dot add force, and we're going to give it so vector 2 dot right, so we'll fire to the right. Oop, where'd that go? And we'll multiply that by, where is my multiply gone? There it is. By, we'll call it bullet speed. Okay, now we don't have this variable here, so let's go do that. So we have jump and speed, so we just need another one, public, so public bullet speed. Oh, and we need to say it's a float, so public float bullet speed, and then we need to give it a value, and we'll give it a value of 100. Okay. The F here at the end of the number is just indicated it's a float. Okay, so so I think I need to add in here rigid body 2D. We'll save this and we'll see if it returns me an error. And then now it's giving me an error on this speed here. So why is that a problem? What have I done here to make speed not recognized? Oh, and I haven't closed my bracket here. Oh, okay, we're okay. So we'll save that and see what horrible compile error I get. So I don't seem to have a compile error, so let's see if that will work. So let's press play, and I'm playing, and I'm going to press spacebar, I can jump, and press F. Okay, so we have given it a force. Okay, so we can fire a bullet and our bullet will move forward. And then if we like this bullet speed here, we can give it maybe 1,000. So now when I press jump and fire, so space and F, you can see it goes much faster. Now, we have a few things that we need to do. Let's just stop here. So let's go back to my bullet. I'm having any. Actually, let's just press play again, and we'll see what issue we have here. So, so these bullets, you can see they're a clone. So these prefabs have been added in, and they're staying here. They're not disappearing. So we need to add in one more script onto this bullet, which basically will say, after a certain amount of time, die or delete yourself. Otherwise, what we'll end up doing is, if we're playing our game and we fire our gun 1,000 times, we'll end up with 1,000 objects that have rigid body physics on them, that require constant calculation to their position and rotation and collision, and they'll all have to be calculated in real time. So we'll end up sort of overloading the game with objects. So normally what you'll do, if the object's not going to fire off the screen and disappear, normally you would just add a script, a simple script to the bullet to say, after a certain amount of time, delete yourself. So we'll make a new script, and we'll call it bullet end, and we'll call that up here. Or no, we won't. Let's double click on that again and load it up. And we're going to say so we don't need update, we just need void start. And we're going to put in a piece of code that will allow us to end the bullet. So hang on here. Okay, so we're looking for yield. So wait for seconds, and we'll put in brackets here 3. So that means, yield wait for 3 seconds. And then we're going to say destroy yourself or delete yourself. So destroy, and then game object. Now game object with a small g refers to the object that the script is on, and a capital G normally refers to another object, and you'd probably have to define that. Okay, so let's save that script. So file, save, and let's see. Yeah, let's see what we get when we come in here. So what am I getting? An error here. So it's saying unexpected symbol on line 9. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. So line 9. So actually what we'll do is, in here we'll turn this into a variable. So we'll say seconds, and then up here we'll define seconds. So we'll say public int, and we'll call this seconds equals 2. Okay. So so let's see if we can get that to work. So it's giving me, I'm trying to figure out why I'm getting an error on this. So an unexpected error. Oh, okay. I I see. So let's just Control C that and get rid of that. I'll put a comma here and go Control V. Okay, so this seems to be a simpler way of doing it. So I can go destroy the game object after this number of seconds. Okay, so let's go back here and see if that has cleared itself. So now what we want to do is, so we want to take this script here, bullet end, and we want to place this onto the prefab. So let's go into the prefab here and check that we have the script. So we have our seconds here. So let's just test that. We'll press play, and I'm going to press F to fire and count 1, 2, and it's gone. So now I can flail away on my fire key, and while I am constantly making new bullets, the existing bullets that are on the screen after a period of time will just delete themselves. Okay, so yeah, so that is you know, a really interesting, I hope, set of tools to explore. So to be the ability to be able to delete the bullet after a certain amount of time, but more importantly, the ability to instantiate or to add in an object and then give it a force. So what we'll do when we're in class is we'll take this and we'll get the character to fire, but we'll also see if we can come up with some more interesting and sort of cunning applications for this code. Alright, so that's enough for now.